By the way, it is totally true about you, Denmark. My social media manager just sent me this important text. Post photo with Denmark. I should point out my social media manager is my wife. That was the text I literally just got. Was like, So all right, we should just do that. All right, like get it in there. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, we'll post that. Anyway, all right, Dan.
All right. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. Definitely want to thank Andrea for being the force of nature that she is. I want to thank Kwame and now David for that effusive flattery here. But more importantly, I want to take the time to thank you, David, for being here. David's been something of a mentor and definitely a lot of a friend for several years now. And a lot of, I haven't even had a chance to tell you this, a lot of the success and the benefits that I've achieved in the Valley have been because I've been able to say I know David. And so.
Not so much. I appreciate it.
And so, I want to take the time here to talk about venture capital and some of the trends that we're seeing. And I wanted to start with, just talking about you a little bit. Like, let's start with something simple. Like, how did you get here?
Well, do you mean actually physically get here? Because that was actually.
Let's start with that story. How about?
No, I don't know about the rest. I looked on my calendar. Here's how I got here. I looked at my calendar. I was like, I drove over to 1600 Amphitheater Parkway. I'm walking around the campus looking for this gathering.
You went to Google headquarters.
At Google's headquarters, which it turns out this is not where this is. And luckily, I happened upon two gentlemen who were having a similar conversation with the security guard there. Like, where is this thing? And so they were getting an address. I said, is there any chance you're going to culture shifting weekend? Now, I have to acknowledge that in the Google campus, when two African-American gentlemen are chatting about getting the address, I suspected that was where you were going, which is an indicator of why this is important and necessary. And so, and the security guard was saying like, and the security guard was saying, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get, I'm sorry that you have to take a second Uber. And I said, well, here's the good news for you gentlemen. The good news is that I can drive you there. The bad news is I drive a Mini. And these are large gentlemen. Kyle, who squeezed in the back, I've never seen this. I've driven many people, but they're usually my children who are about like me. He had to literally luxuriate across the back in order to fit in my Mini. But anyway, so that's not really that is how I got here, but that's not really what you mean.
But it's actually a good story.
But it is true. It was like a clown car. So when I bought this Mini, I'd been a venture capitalist for a little while.
Hey, come on now, give me a number, like a range.
So now I've been a venture capitalist for 17 years. So I had been an attorney for 6, which seemed like too much. The short version of how I got here is I got a computer music degree, and that qualified me to do nothing. So then I got a master's in criminology, and that qualified me to do nothing. And then I got a law degree, which unfortunately qualified me to be a lawyer. And so then I was a lawyer for 3 years as a litigator, and then I came out to the Bay Area, in part because Jerry Yang and the early Yahoo team were friends of mine from my freshman dorm. Nice. And so that was nice, and I should have joined them, but I didn't. I became their outside counsel at this law firm, and I suddenly realized startups were amazing because they were just these aggregations of really smart people who were trying to make things happen. They were trying to change the world. I thought this was amazing, and because I had been an attorney for such a short period of time, and because I was not really a rule follower, I would jump in like, you know what we should do? We should do this. We should do that. And usually when your lawyer says that, you're like, who's we, mister? Like, yeah, we're doing it. Go back to your office. But I would sit with these teams. I go, like, oh, my God, have you met Denmark West? You should meet Denmark because he'd be great. And they'd be like, all right, fine. And I'd introduce him. And so unfortunately, in one instance, I kind of did this thing. I was at a board meeting. There were a bunch of venture capitalists who thought a lot of themselves, and they were explaining why they thought that this company should do a particular thing. And when they finished pontificating, I was like, yeah, that's a great idea, only don't do that. That's like terrible. Don't do that. Here are all the reasons why that's a bad idea. And I was fired basically instantaneously by those people. So it's not like this was a perfect strategy. But anyway, I was working with this company, Evite, and the team liked me, and there were the firm August Capital had invested, and they had partners. And they were sort of like, well, ordinarily lawyers, we don't like lawyers or whatever, but you're saying reasonable things, and so maybe we should think about whether you could play a bigger role. And eventually, after a bunch of 4 months of lunches and dinners and interviews, they talked to 15 references, all these things. Then they're like, all right, David, lawyers suck at this, but we like you. So if you want to join us, and I always thought of it like the Princess Bride. This is a crowd that, Princess Bride, yes, no? All right. So I always thought of it like I was the Dread Pirate Roberts, like I came in and they're like, we'll most likely kill you in the morning. And, but we like you, but we'll most likely kill you in the morning. And 17 years later, I am the Dread Pirate Roberts. So that's kind of how I
I feel like I need one of these now. Yeah. So you covered a lot of ground there, which is awesome. One of the things that I wanted to just come back to quickly was you pointed out one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which is how do you get into venture, right? Yeah. A lot of people talk about how it's a relatively small and tightly knit and relatively closed industry that feels more like a club, like country club kind of club, not nightclub, because I know some of you guys like to get lit. So just
Sand Hill Road is not your place.
Right.
That's not the answer.
And so one of the things that I hear people say who've successfully and unsuccessfully tried to get into venture is just how difficult it is and how the process seems to be laborious and long and trying. Just like your story is interesting. Have you seen any evolution in that process over the last decade and a half that you've been in this space?
Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, I have lots of conversations like this with students. I've been teaching. I teach this entrepreneurship class out at Harvard Law School, and basically I infect the minds of these poor lawyers who thought they were going to be lawyers, and after a couple of weeks of stories, they kind of go, huh, maybe I should do that. And so then they inevitably say, can I take you to lunch and you can tell me how I can be a VC? And basically my answer is, oh, no, you can't. Like, nobody's a VC. That's a terrible idea. There isn't really a path. But there is sort of an answer, right? And there's lots of things that are helpful to being a VC. You know this now. Like, there are all these things that make you better at being a VC. There's no thing that's sufficient, right. And there's no one person who has all of these things. So you could be a soothsayer and a technologist and an organizational expert and a lawyer and an accountant and all these things. You need all of those things. And I always say, like, the thing that's most important at the end of the day, and this is why you are the natural fit, is it's about relationships. Like, the venture business is entirely about networks and relationships. And so when folks ask me, oh, how do you end up in the venture business? First of all, I say you don't, so do things you like, because you're probably not going to not do those things. So doing things you don't like in order to land in a business that you do like is a stupid idea. But do the things you like that allow you to interact with tons of people in interesting ways, right? And the value of that is you will emerge knowing lots of smart people, engaged in lots of interesting conversations, et cetera, and you then may be able to sneak into this job, which when I became a VC, I called my mother apologetically. When you call a Jewish mother and tell her you're no longer a lawyer, this is like, the only thing worse than that is telling your Jewish mother that you're going to be a lawyer, not a doctor. So I called her up. I said, oh, I got bad news for you. I'm going to be a venture capitalist. She's like, what is a venture capitalist? And I explained to her, oh, here's what a venture capitalist is. And my mother said, in all her wisdom, wait a second. You talked your way into a job that only involves talking. And I said, yeah, that's exactly right. And she's like, that's perfect for you. So that, like, how do you get to that point? And so, one of the things that obviously as I sit here with you and as I have this gathering called the Lobby, and the Lobby is this invite-only group of thought leaders in tech. And the first iteration of the Lobby, which was now 11 years ago, I convened a group of my friends and said, who are the thinkers and shakers, smart people who we think would be a great group of people? And that group of people was...
And thank you for allowing me to crash and not kicking me out.
No, you're amazing. But that group was, in all fairness, that group was incredibly white, incredibly male, incredibly straight. It was, because no effort had been made at the front end to give a shit about that. Only, it's like, hey, white guys, tell me who you like. And then they told me a bunch of white men. And so over the course of the last, call it 11 years, 10 years, I have done a better job. I have made a concerted effort up until recently to fix the gender profile of the conference, and you've seen that change.
Absolutely.
Which is better than nothing. Thank you. And so in the most recent, in the most recent efforts, I'm trying to fix the cultural makeup of the group of people who are coming. And one of the things that I realized as I was doing that, and one of the reasons that it was imperative that I do that, is that there was a wonderfully smart African American woman who, after going to the lobby, sent me this email, and what she said was, David, I can't tell you how incredibly grateful I am to have come to the lobby because you loaned me your network. And and I didn't have access to that network until the lobby, but now it's my network. Mm-hmm. And that was completely right. Like, for all of us. And not like, look, my network was going to a bunch of elite institutions. That gave me a head start. But then what I discovered was, okay, the key is, if you meet amazing people like at Denmark West, meet their friends. Right? That's networking. If Denmark says to me, this is an amazing person you should meet, I will meet with him or her. Period. That's not a question. And so this
and thank you for that too.
Yeah, no, please. And I suspect vice versa, right? Like I think that
absolutely.
Right. So anyway, this is a very long answer to, I don't even remember the question, but that's the story of my life. but my point is, networks, yeah, VC networks. That's where we were. Being a great VC is about having an amazing network and doing the things that cultivate those amazing networks. And so I now think of the lobby as this opportunity to make sure that it's inclusive and thoughtful and gives people who otherwise have access or not the ability to meet amazing people and make those connections. And so this year we'll do better, and next year we'll do better than that, which is why I'm so grateful to be asked to sit here with you, even though I understand that, I'm just David. So
I like how you did the self-deprecating humor there at the end.
Whatever. It is what it is.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about how you manage life, and then we'll get back into venture capital. So you've got the conference. Mm-hmm. You teach at Harvard Law School. You've got the actual day job, right? So you venture thing, in which you have the blog and the podcast. You also support GLAAD, and there's like a long list here. I don't want to belabor the point. How do you get it all done?
I used to sleep less, and then I only say that half joking, and I think it's actually a problem. I don't think it's a great solution. I don't think it's a great strategy, but it was mine, which was to be manic, which is pretty obvious. And secondly, to over time, just when in doubt, sleep less. And it was a couple or few years ago when I realized that I didn't have any less to sleep. Right, I had gotten to the point where I was sleeping kind of consistently 4 hours a night, mm-hmm. and when sleep less meant sleep 3 hours a night, that's not actually. I mean, 4 hours is pretty stupid to start, but 3 hours is unsustainable. Yeah. And so I had to start making choices. I say that it's so laughable that I say that because I don't make choices at all. Because the problem I have is this: to the conversation we were just having. Yeah. If you say to me, David, hey, please meet so-and-so, or here's an interesting business, or have you had this, or can I have this conversation, or whatever, my answer is yes. The answer is yes. And so what gives? Like, what gives? And right. So I'll say this. I was chatting with the guys in my clown car on the way over here, and I was telling them that I couldn't, and I can't even, and I acknowledge and regret that I can't remember your name, because I was saying I'm dyslexic and I can't remember any names. But one of the huge advantages of dyslexia is that you can't read a page. So it's not like you're ever going to do everything. You're not of the illusion that you're actually going to do everything. And so your entire life is a trick to figure out how to do the things that you should have done, but you didn't. Right? My entire life is, and maybe in high school
I might be dyslexic too.
Maybe that was whatever. But it's do a set of things. You do, yeah. And so as life throws you more and more stuff, what you learn are the shortcuts to getting to those answers, right? Are the shortcuts, because otherwise you couldn't do it, right? So I have to rely on folks when I'm looking at a company. If it seems exciting to me, I could spend the next 2 weeks becoming an expert in financial services and payments, or because I know a ton of interesting people, I can reach out and say, oh, this is an interesting content business that's related to the music industry. Denmark, Kwame, you want to can you take a look, tell me what you think? And you can take your years of expertise and share it with me. Mm-hmm. And then my only job is to make sure that I know that you're the right person and trustworthy and will give me a thoughtful, valuable answer. And then I've just cut away millions of hours of time that I otherwise couldn't have fit in. And so to the extent that I do anything, I sort of do that. And then otherwise I sleep less.
Got it. So then let's talk a little bit now about how you sort of work in your firm, right? Mm-hmm. And so you've been doing the August Capital thing for a while now. And as a result of doing that and doing it well and getting respect in the firm, you've taken on more leadership over time. And how's that working for you?
Yeah. How many of you are in partnerships? In your jobs, partnerships, not... partnerships are hard. Partnerships... Because the problem with, what I say to my young CEOs is, here's the good news. The good news is you're the CEO, and you get to tell people what to do. It's your job to say, do these sets of things, right? And if you're good at that job, you've earned the respect and the expectation that you'll take in a bunch of inputs, make a reasonable decision, and then come to a conclusion, and that is the answer. That is not true of partnerships, right? No matter how they're structured, there are a bunch of people, many of whom think they are the most important in that partnership. They may or may not be right about that. That's what my partners would say about me. They'd be like, oh, Hornik thinks he's I don't know why David thinks he's in charge just because he's been here the longest, which is a reasonable point, And so you actually can't, and this translates to company building, right? Because when I sit on the board of a company, the thing that's been most interesting to me over the bunch of years is I thought, oh yeah, you get on the board and then you tell the CEOs, do this, do that, and then they do it, and that's amazing, oh, I'm the puppet master, woo, and then you quickly realize, and now the way I describe the business of being a venture capitalist is that VCs sit at what looks like a mixing board. There's sliders and there are knobs, and you're busy spinning them and moving them, whatever. And then you look behind the mixing board, and the only thing connected is the on-off switch. That is all you got. All that other shit you're doing is I hope that dude's having fun. It has no bearing on what we're doing in this business, but keep up the good work, And the only thing you have is CEO or not CEO. That's the whole thing, right?
That's right.
But what you can do, which is, probably what a good producer really does, is say, yeah, you should talk to so-and-so about that because I'm not sure that's the thing. Or as I just did at a recent board meeting, had this board meeting, and we get to the end of the board meeting, we get to the executive session, and they're sitting there, oh, what do you think, whatever. And all I had to do was say, so tell me how this executive is doing. That was it. And it was like, yeah. Okay, we know. I mean, I didn't even have to say anything because it was so obvious that the next sets of things.
Right.
So this is true in partnerships as well, where there's a bunch of things that you say and do that aren't actually determinative, but they impact the direction you're heading in. And it's kind of fun, but it's actually, it can be frustrating and inefficient and whatever else. And then, of course, the problem with the venture business is that nobody actually knows what they're doing in the venture business. Even the people who've been the most successful venture capitalists on the planet are just making it up every day. So just because you funded Facebook doesn't mean you'll get the next Facebook. You know why you funded Facebook? Because you thought it looked cool, and you were right. That required two things. One, that you thought it looked cool, and two, that you were right. Guess what? The likelihood that they notice the next one and think it's cool and then are right is infinitesimally small.
And is it Benchmark that has the list of the ones that they've been?
It's a name that I don't remember.
Okay.
No, it'll come to me. David Cowan. Where's Cowan?
Yeah, I'm trying to play.
Whatever.
Yeah, but
Bessemer, thank you.
Starts with a B. Thank you.
Bessemer has their anti-portfolio.
Mr. Wooten, very much appreciated.
Exactly. The Bessemer anti-portfolio.
Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about how you think about the industry as a whole. First in terms of its evolution, and just as a new entrant into the venture business, it seems like almost how 1999 everybody was doing a startup. It seems like 2017 everybody's doing a venture fund. Right. And so the question I have is, between the new venture funds, the crowdfunding, the corporate venture capital, do you have any thoughts about the amount of money that's sort of rushing into the market, or the type of money that's coming into the market for investing in startups?
Well, yeah, it's stupid. It's just stupid.
No, really. How do you feel, though?
It's stupid. Like, we had this from 2000 to 2010. For every dollar invested in the venture business, you received 90 cents. So that's a bad return on your investment, which is why you would never say, like, let's create an index fund of all venture capitalists and we'll put money in, because it turns out that the vast majority of returns in the venture business come out of a very small set of funds, and everybody else is sort of break even or worse. And the only thing you're doing as an investor is trying to get into those best funds and hoping that they stay the best funds, right? And the only thing I'm doing as a fund manager is trying to make sure we stay one of those best funds so that people will keep giving me money, so I'll keep seeing interesting businesses. So, and that the number of those firms is not getting bigger, right? If there, so here's the measure, right? If there were more billion-dollar businesses being created, then it would make sense to have a bigger funnel. Okay, great, more bottom of the top of the funnel and blah, blah,
So
blah.
David, I'm going to challenge you on that, because what I've seen is that the ones at the top, in terms of, sort of $500 million under management or more, that number isn't changing. But what I have seen over the last few years is, whether it's, Chris Sacca at lowercase, or the guys over.
Yeah, I think I wasn't clear. I mean companies. I mean
okay,
outcomes.
Gotcha.
Like, are there billion-dollar companies built?
Got it.
Not folks investing billions of dollars.
Right.
No, I totally agree. The number of seed funds out there is ballooning.
Yeah.
And it will go exactly like the venture funds, which is there will be a core set of winners that will invest in a disproportionate number of the companies that become billion-dollar outcomes.
Right.
And then there'll be a very large number of losers who don't see those interesting business. And it's completely simple and self-perpetuating, which is when you go to raise money, you talk to people for one of two reasons. Either you have a relationship with that individual that leads you, or someone who has a relationship with that individual that leads you to believe that he or she would be a good investor for you. The other reason is because that investor has invested in amazing companies you know about, and therefore you want to be like that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Those are kind of the only reasons. And as a result of that, by and large, the best funds have the best people, see the best opportunities, get the opportunity to fund them, and therefore do the best. And so if you're not in that group, then you only see the things that the best funds have turned down, and the likelihood that one of those is a great company is non-zero, but smaller, right? And so it's this self-perpetuating cycle.
So the thing that's interesting about that is I find that the self-perpetuating cycle, I believe, is true at Series A and later. I've seen that break down tremendously at the seed level. And so when I look at the people that I think are doing a really, really good job, like whether it's ENIAC out of New York for mobile, or lowercase out of the Valley, or the Felicus guys who now have a larger fund, but when they started it was small, or even Female Founders Fund, or those types of funds, they weren't what I would consider on the grid venture capitalists. They weren't. I'm from Kleiner or August or NEA or Index out of. They weren't one of those guys, and they weren't from those places.
Nope.
But yet they had tapped into unique networks. Back to your point on relationships and networks, they had tapped into unique networks in some cases of entrepreneurs who hadn't necessarily, gotten the respect or the attention that they should have, and they were able to get 1, 2, or 3 pretty massive hits. And
Yeah.
that seems to be a pattern that I see that's not isolated.
Yeah, except that if you fast forward 10 years from now, it'll be exactly like the Series A, right?
So you're saying it regresses to the
this is
mean?
early, right? So
You're saying it regresses to the
establish
mean?
yourself. Quick, hurry up. That shit's closing.
Point taken.
No,
Point
no,
taken.
I think,
okay,
right?
So
No, because if you look, right, yes, first, Chris Sacca hadn't funded things, and then he saw a bunch of interesting things.
Yeah.
But now lowercase capital will see a bunch of interesting deals
Absolutely.
because it's like, oh, you were in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Same thing with First Round or True Ventures or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when they started out, everybody was in the same footing because there was no such thing as a successful seed company. Now there are a set of them, and so they're going to have that same, brand advantage. But again, look, when I got to August Capital, August had no name, no brand, and I would say 17 years later, it has next to no brand, which is really painful. Like I've spent 17 years on, hey, August Capital, August Capital.
didn't August Capital invest in Microsoft?
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? Just for the record, the partners at August invested in Microsoft, Sun, Compaq, Intuit, Symantec, Seagate, Xilinx. Like they had done very well, but my partners didn't.
That's like Silicon Valley version 1.
Yeah, no, exactly. And but my partners didn't like talking about it. So I'd say, oh, we should do X, Y, and Z, and they'd be like, oh, that's dirty. Like, let's not do it. I'm like, they were so confused by me. They had many, many times, I'm sure, when they were like, we should kill him. That little man is deeply annoying. Who said he could join us? And the only saving grace, and this is the saving grace of the venture business, is that in year 11, right? I describe this just like parenting. Those of you who are parents will totally appreciate this. No parent ever talks about this. You have this baby, and it is yours, and it is beautiful, and it reminds you of you, and it's whatever. It's amazing. And for the first 3 months, anything it does is completely fantastic because it's yours. By month 3, you're like, this thing is so annoying. All it does is shit and puke on me, and it's waking up every 3 seconds, whatever. And just when you're like, I think I'll kill this thing, then it smiles at you, and you go, whoa, look at that. The thing smiled. I guess I'll give you 3 more months. And in 3 more months, it crawls, and then it starts walking, and then it starts talking. And then it's a teenager, and it's strong enough to fight back. That's the whole process. So in the venture business, I got there and they're like, this thing's curious, we'll let him around. And then I like, oh, he seems to be seeing interesting deals, we'll let him go. And in year 10, they're kind of like, oh, man, how many more years do we have to live with this thing? It's really, this thing is deeply annoying. And in year 11, this company I funded called Splunk went public and made $600 million, and they each bought a new home. And you know what? You'll put up with a lot of shit when I buy you a new home. That's right. Or 6. As the case may be.
So let's talk a little bit from an entrepreneurial perspective. I appreciate the conversation from a venture perspective. From an entrepreneurial perspective, one of the things, and there's a few entrepreneurs that are actually in the room. One of the things that entrepreneurs are curious about are, criteria that venture capitalists look for. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is this notion of being a venture scale business, right? Because there's a lot of good businesses that you're going to look at and say, hey, I like this entrepreneur. Hey, this is a very good business. But no, because it's not venture scale, right?
Yeah.
Could you
Yeah. No, I mean, the problem with the venture business is, again, back to, my current fund is a $450 million fund. So let's call it a $500 million fund because I'm not good at math. I have a $500 million fund. And so in order for this to be a good investment for my investors, to be considered one of the top venture funds, then not only do I have to return $500 million, but I have to return another $1 billion on top of that, right? So they need to make $1 billion, which means I have to have investments in companies that ultimately is worth $1.5 billion. I invest in companies, and if something miraculous happens, I may still own 20% of that company when it goes public, right? Splunk, which we made a ton of money on, we owned 17%, which was considered amazing. But let's call it 20 because, again, I'm terrible at math. In order to deliver $1.5 billion in return, it means that I have to drive 5 times that in market cap. I have to have the companies I invest in be worth, what is that, $7.5 billion? Anyone math? But so, it has to $7.5 billion. Yeah. Has to be worth. Now maybe you fund the one amazing company, right? If you had funded Airbnb, if we had not turned down Airbnb, then it would almost assuredly have returned more than the fund. But why is that? Because it's worth billions of dollars. So if you fund amazing businesses, smart people that are even predictably going to exit at $250 million, $250 million, I cannot fund you because it's not enough to make my investors money, even though it'll make you rich and it'll seem like a great outcome. To me, it's like, that was a good warm-up. Come back when you have a multi-billion-dollar outcome. It's a real problem. And so oftentimes it's like, hey, I love you, but this is not I don't think this gets to be a big enough business. By the way, I should point out that this is why we turned down Uber. We literally looked at Uber, Series A, and I had backed Travis's last company, and I had backed Garrett's last company. They came to me for the Series A, and they had this black car service where you could pay like 1.5 times a taxi to get a limousine to pick you up, and it was growing quickly in San Francisco. And we said, all right, that's actually a great experience, but how many people are going to do that? Like, it's probably good in LA, and it's probably good in San Francisco, and it's probably good in New York. So what is that? That's like a couple, $100 million business or something? Nah. That was a lot more than a few houses. But, that's the business.
Definitely. And so in terms of giving advice to entrepreneurs, right? So, one thing is just understanding this notion of venture scale, right? And so just because you have a good business and just because you can get to a very good outcome doesn't mean that it's necessarily venture scale, and venture scale is like one of the limiting criteria for how you enter into deals. Are there other sort of tips that you would give? Because the other thing that I hear very frequently from entrepreneurs is that venture capitalists have their own language, and that they say something that means one thing in English, but when venture capitalists say it, it means something completely different.
I mean, the primary thing that we say that is not true is everything. Which is to say that the vast majority, look, I see 1,000 businesses in a year. I meet with 100 of them. I get excited about 10, and I fund 2, which means that 998 businesses out of 1,000 I say no to. Of those 998 businesses out of 1,000 that I say no to, probably 750 of them, if I were to tell you the truth in my email or conversation with you, I'd say, I cannot back you. You are terrible. That's not a thing we say. You know why it's not a thing we say? Because it's jerky, and people will stop coming to visit you. So instead you say all sorts of things like, I don't think that's a big enough business, or I really enjoyed it, but you're too early for me, or I think the stage is wrong, or whatever else. And 9 times out of 10, that means, wow, you suck. And I'm being super honest here, and if this gets tweeted, I'm dead. Don't tweet that.
Andrea, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier.
Okay. Yeah, right. So anyway, so here's what I think. So cut to the so how do you get funded, right? Here's how people get funded. People become the experts in this thing that they're telling you about that's exciting. They become true experts, and that doesn't mean you start the business as an expert, although that's super helpful. If you were a security expert and building security systems for EY for decades, and then you say, oh, there's this disunity that I've seen 1,000 times, I'm going to build a company in it. We go, oh, great, do that. I funded this dude, René Lacerte, who he was running payroll at Intuit, and he left Intuit to create a payroll business. His parents ran a payroll business. His uncle had a payroll business that he sold to Intuit. It was like, you should do payroll. My friend, I will fund you to do payroll. But that's pretty unusual. I'm done. Am I done? Anyway. Okay, so anyway, the short version is be an expert. That doesn't mean come out with expertise. It means earn the expertise. So when I ask you a question, you answer it in a way where I go, wow, you are an expert. You understand. And by the way, there's one other thing. That expertise includes saying, I don't know. When I ask you an unknowable question, which, by the way, I will ask you because that's what you have to go, I don't know the answer to that, but here's what I think because I'm an expert. And lots of experts or or newbies to it think I have to give you an answer if you're asking me a question. And so they say, oh, it's this. And I think to myself, how do you know that? You know that's not right because you're an expert. If you were an expert, you know that's insane. And so you should tell me I don't know. So be an expert. Be someone who is who can speak to something big and exciting and interesting. And if we get excited about that, then great. Let's go build a big thing.
So on that note, I think we have time for 2 questions from the
I will
audience.
try desperately to answer in short ways. No.
I figured you couldn't see me if I didn't stand up. Really enjoyed this. My question is simple.
Hello, Dr. Green. Do you want to say who you are?
Now I don't need to. Okay, I am Dr. Hadia Nicole Green. I'm one of the first 100 African American female physicists in the country, and I've developed some laser and nanotechnology-based cancer treatments that don't have observed side effects in mice. I am the founder of the Orly Smith Cancer Research Foundation, named after my late aunt who inspired me to pursue this field of study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have a question?
I like
No, that's
this.
it. Drop the mic. Drop the mic. Next question. Although that's mean to everyone else, I think so.
No, so my question is, what makes those 2 people that you fund out of all those you see, what makes them the winner? What's special about what they do?
Man. Yeah. No, I don't know. There's something interesting. So it is this strange thing, and I think that, and I was just talking with these very smart young recent Stanford grads who are starting applying for Y Combinator, and it's 2 African American men and a Latinx woman who have started this company. It's this social network for social causes. And so I just was working with them on Friday on a mock interview about what is it, how are we going to succeed, right? How are we going to get through this thing? And the answer I was partially what I just described, which is be the expert, be the person where you just want to, where you want to get, you think that their answers are credible and thoughtful. Here's the other answer, is that the venture business is very much like dating. Now, you all know this is a double-edged sword, but having now spoken with you for about 12 seconds, I know that you are one of the most charismatic humans on the planet Earth. You are someone people want to spend more time with. What people get confused about when they're pitching a VC is that they think they have to convince you to invest in day one. That's like my wife going on our first date and then being like, well, hey, what do you think? We in or we out? All I needed to know was, how about tomorrow? And truthfully, that's venture capital. It's like, I just need to be sufficiently excited about you as a person and what you're building that I want to talk to you tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, And Renee Lacerte and I, Mr. Charisma in the payroll business, I backed his first company, and I'm now an investor in his second company. And Renee and I walk the dish, this walk up in the foothills here, once a month we have for 16 years. That's a lot of connection, right? That's a lot of conversations and engagement and whatever else. And so it's about connections and being excited and and wanting to spend more time with someone and to garner the excitement that they bring to the business.
Last question.
I'm Don Jones. I'm a banker at Bank of America in Boston, and I went to Harvard undergrad, and so I know your Harvard Law School connection. And a lot of people in Boston are trying to figure out why Boston hasn't become more of a tech hub. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, part of it is part of the challenge is risk and all these other things. But here's the bizarre and unfair thing, which is that it's a little bit like there has to be a catalyst. And so Silicon Valley has a lot of catalysts. So if you're going to start a business in Boston, you have to think that you're going to be that catalyst. Whereas if you're going to start a business around here, you go, oh, I'm within 100 miles of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, eBay, whatever. And so there's just this incredible gravitational pull to Silicon Valley. And what we keep wanting to see in these other markets is what's going to do it, right? So, oh God, what is the Something Hub, the enterprise business that is in Boston? HubSpot. It looked like HubSpot actually would be one of those things. Went public, was worth a lot of money, and in fact, there was more enterprise businesses being born. In Los Angeles, the fact that Snapchat has now become a multi-billion-dollar business will likely fuel more and more businesses in Silicon Ocean or whatever they're calling it.
I think they said Silicon Beach.
Silicon Beach, whatever, whatever. Not that I'm questioning. I'm just saying, like, life's a beach. Good luck, people. Anyway, so you have every other thing, and if there's one breakout business, then I think it will return to its greater glory.
So with that, could we please get a big round of applause for David Hornik?
Thank you.